Hi, I'm Molly Bryson, and I am a Knox County resident, and I am a huge supporter of Planned Parenthood, the Affordable Care Act, and Medicaid. It affects me very personally. When I grew up, I was in a very conservative church that kind of blocked my way of education, of learning about my body and how everything worked, how reproduction works. I did not have comprehensive sex education. I was taught to be more ashamed of my body than anything else. And after I graduated high school, I found myself pregnant at 18 years old. And I honestly had no idea what to do. So I had turned to get some help from a crisis pregnancy center. And this is a center that I had personally helped to raise money for. I had protested with them against Planned Parenthood and against reproductive freedoms. All the things I stand for so strongly today, I was not always on this side of the fence. When I went to that crisis pregnancy center, I was met with shame, with pain, with judgment, and they basically treated me terribly. They looked down their noses at me, and it was a horrible experience. I ended up having a miscarriage of that pregnancy, and I had no idea what was happening. I turned to them again for help because I was so desperate, and they basically told me that it was my punishment, that I needed to repent, that I needed to ask for forgiveness, and I needed to stop having sex before marriage. Despite the fact that they knew nothing about my situation or who I was as a person, I was still met with more judgment despite the fact that I was in emotional and physical pain. In a desperate moment, I turned to Planned Parenthood. I had protested against them. I raised money for a center that wanted to shut them down, and they still welcomed me. They did not judge me. They gave me real education and health care. They taught me about my body and how to protect myself and make sure that I did not find myself in this situation again. And I was able to move on physically and emotionally from that experience. I joined the Army, I traveled the world, I met my husband, and now I have a beautiful 2-year-old daughter named Ariella. And it is because of her that I have forced myself to become more politically active in fighting against any of these reincarnations of Trump care that we keep having to fight, because she is a Medicaid recipient and we depend on the Affordable Care Act to ensure that she will always have care. My daughter has epilepsy and it's severe. She also has a growth hormone deficiency and many developmental delays, and because of that we have to see several specialists. We see an endocrinologist, a neurologist. She has 5 days of therapy a week with a different therapist for feeding, occupational therapy, physical therapy, developmental therapy, speech therapy, everything you can think of. And all of these things, if the Affordable Care Act were to go away, there's no way we could possibly afford any of these things. Her medications are $5,000 plus a month just by themselves, and that doesn't include the therapies, the medication visits that we have to be able to get refills. It doesn't cover her specialist visits or her trips to the pediatrician. She's been admitted to East Tennessee Children's Hospital right down the street from here several times in the last couple of months because of her epilepsy and having too many seizures for us to control at home. And we depend on the Affordable Care Act and we depend on Medicaid to help us to be able to provide the care that she so desperately needs. And the Graham Cassidy bill could be devastating to the protections that she has because she was born with these things. She is 2 years old, and without the protections of the Affordable Care Act, we could be potentially looking at these things that she was born with being considered pre-existing conditions and never being able to get health insurance for her. And without Medicaid, we honestly could not possibly afford the medications or the care that she needs. So,
thank you. And you know, one other point you talked about, a lot of people think that if you're a veteran, you and your husband are both veterans, they assume that there's automatically care.
Oh, there absolutely is not automatically care for all veterans. I was medically retired, so I personally do have access to TRICARE. However, even with TRICARE and paying for co-pays and things like that, get extremely expensive for my child. And we are very fortunate that I do have access to TRICARE myself, but that is absolutely not something that all veterans have. You have to be either medically retired or retire after your 20 years of service. Not all veterans have access to that. And even the ones that do decide to go to the VA for health care for their specific things that were caused by their military service, it's an extremely long wait. My husband started working on his packet almost 2 years ago now, and we still have not gathered all the information that he needs because we cannot find part of his military medical records. They were mysteriously lost, and this is something that happens to so many veterans. We're fortunate that we're recent veterans, so there's most things in computer systems and things like that, but think about veterans that served before we had automated medical records to have access to, those that were from the Vietnam War era that are still trying to find health care, that are homeless because they are not able to get the care that they need. They can't afford the care that they need. And it's pitiful, really, that we have to continue to fight this every day.
Thank you so much.